Thanks for checking out our podcast. If you are interested in learning more about writing, go check out our syndication page, seriouswriter.com, where you can find resources, articles, videos, topical classes, and the Brew and Ink podcast. Again, seriouswriter.com. We thank you for listening. Welcome back, everyone, to another Brew and Ink podcast. We are happy to be here with a full crew, 4 of us tonight. We have Bill Hawkins with us. Great to have him back. And Britt Mooney.
What's up, everybody?
And myself, SM Freehand. And, of course, Katie is here as well. Katie Compton.
Hey, guys.
And we've got an exciting episode for you. We have crossed over 100 episodes in totality. Between our writing episodes and then our Interbrew episodes and review episodes, we have crossed that 100 threshold. Can you guys believe it?
I can believe it. We also have almost 32,000 downloads.
Very cool.
We got 31,000 plus downloads over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I only know how many episodes we have because Google Podcasts says it up at the top of,
Oh, yeah.
I've lost count, but we are starting season 7 storyline. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to kick it off with another flash fiction competition because it was a blast before. You guys really liked it. A lot of interaction was there. And we haven't done any flash fiction in a good bit. So we're happy to be doing this again. This time around, we're going to be picking our own titles. We're not drawing names out of a hat. We're not at the whim of chance, but it's still going to be fun nonetheless. We're going to pit 2 stories against each other. You guys, our faithful listeners, are going to vote on which story you liked better and that you want us to turn into a full series. And then the next episode will have 2 more stories you can vote on, and those final 2 will go against each other. And the winner of it all will be the season 7 stories that we will all work on together. Booyah.
Booyah.
Yes. I'm excited to do this.
So let me ask you about this.
Yeah.
The last time that I was involved in a flash fiction contest, of course, we did draw the names out of the hat. So are we going to continue the flash fiction as a longer story, or is this a rolling flash? Okay. So it's not just a flash fiction and then another flash fiction, different line. It's going to be a continued story from the flash fiction. So a chapter fiction.
Exactly. Yeah. You'll have a chance to kind of try and sell your story a little more, make it a little more interesting if you win this first round. And then, from there, we may not use exactly everything that we put into the flash fiction, but it will be, the backbones of what we'll do for the overall season. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Bill, now, I don't know how much you've been keeping up, but this will be a good review for new faithful listeners that we have. We did 2 seasons ago, season 5, Britt and I did a sci-fi story, which was quite fun. And I know Britt really liked it. Britt, you want to give like a little teaser on that?
Yeah, it was called Singularity, and it was really fun because we started to learn after a season of Boneyard, and then we kind of more perfected it when we had the bigger group and we did the murder mystery. I thought it was a great kind of world building that we did, so I think it's kind of fun.
Yeah. So, hero was a 4-letter word. Was a great little thing, and we definitely have Katie to thank for that with the idea and really helping us dig up all those fun facts about the dinosaurs.
For our listeners, I'd like to get a little update on what Bill's been doing, because our listeners have been hearing us ramble about what we've been doing over the last year or 2. I'd love to get people a little bit of an update on Bill's writing journey.
Well, this is in theory. I've got 5 novels completed and 1 on the 3rd draft, but completed isn't really a very valid statement, is it? Not with writing. It's complete when it's been published. Right. And you've got to check.
Right.
Until then, it's not complete. It hasn't had the cover applied by an actual publishing house or anything like that. So So I'm in that mode. I am. I've got also two novellas that I've written. One of them was, if you guys remember, I had my initial novel was called Armed to the Dentures. It was my second, but it was the first one where I really knew what I was doing when I started. And Armed to the Dentures is about a bunch of octogenarian women who are in a nursing home, a retirement home, and the guy that runs the place absconds with all their money, which is, by the way, a very popular topic in the news these days about elder abuse and this was written before it was a popular topic. I'm not going to say I brought it up. I didn't, but because nobody's read the book yet. But that story is about a bunch of old people, and I came up with that idea because I was writing a book that never went anywhere, and that book that never went anywhere. One of the characters was interviewing people in a nursing home, and I thought, man, these people have real stories. You know, if you've ever sat down with somebody that was over 80, for example, and had time to spend with them, you find out they have some crazy stories about life that you just never imagined they would be the person that the first person that had a car in West Texas or something crazy like that, and that's the kind of story this is. It's about these people, and it's a deeper story. And I'm back to that one right now. And if you could see me, you'd see that I'm holding a stack about 2 inches thick in my hand, and that's the proofread edit I'm working on this right now. Yeah. But I'm going to publish that one. I'm going to self-publish that particular novel because it's really too long for publishing houses, and I just don't think it's sellable that way. So I'm going to have to go the self-publishing route, and I'm working on that right now, and that's what I've been headfirst into for months now.
Good deal.
It's definitely an undertaking to try and get those hundreds and hundreds of pages down to what we would say a perfect draft, which is, we all know, will never be. At some point you have to go, okay, I won't do draft number 20.
Yeah. There's never good enough. There's never perfect. There's only good enough.
Good enough. Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's the 90% rule or the 95% rule or whatever you want to apply to it. But you know what I also did recently, which is really frightening, because I actually pulled out one of my grammar books. I always kept them on the shelf. I kept them on the shelf. If you've ever read any of my stuff, you'd know I kept them on the shelf. I actually got out a grammar book and actually started relearning grammar. It's something that you think, well, I already know this stuff. You don't necessarily. Sometimes you forget things that are little minor rules that proofreaders and editors go crazy about.
Yeah, that's definitely, as a writer, there's something we could all benefit from brushing up on.
I've actually made a ridiculous habit of doing it at least once a week lately, just reading through the same stuff, just as a reminder. And it's amazing how many errors I see in my own writing when I do.
Right. Yep. And speaking of errors in our own writing, I'll be happy to share what I've been working on these past few weeks. And here's the tricky thing with flash fiction that our faithful listeners, you'll find out if you ever attempt this, is that a flash fiction, you really have to have it in your mind, like, I need to do 1, maybe 2 scenes and kind of wrap up the character and a moment in a tight little short story. And of course, for me, I'm like, ooh, this is my idea, and I wanted to go here, here, and here, and this is how I'll get there. And then before I know it, I'm like, oh, I've got to cut out that scene, and I've got to cut out that 100 words here and there, and trying to get it under 1,500 words and be a complete storyline can be the biggest challenge of it all when doing flash fiction. So for mine, I picked fantasy, but I picked like a twist on what I would call like the Disney princess fantasy, where, everything works out perfectly for our Disney princesses, magic and everything. So I took that and tried to turn it upon its head. And that is the name of the story, is Upon Its Head. She slipped the ring on, imagining again for the 100th time what it would be like to marry the prince of her dreams and live happily ever after. She had read about it time and time again. In every story, the princess gets her prince and they live happily until the end of their days. But so far, for Princess Drosera, her life had been anything but a fairy tale. Instead of having a magically perfect life like her sister Princess Lilac, Drosera found herself in quite the opposite life. Ever since she could remember, whenever the sisters played outside, the world seemed to be out to get her. Once the two of them were fashioning tiaras for themselves. The birds, squirrels, and mice brought Lilac all kinds of beautiful garland and flowers to use. But for Drosera, the woodland creatures only seemed to despise and have contempt for her. They tore at her dress and scampered off with her twigs and reeds. Only a sad possum with a nubby hind leg brought her treasures, mostly bones of small rodents and spoiled fruit. Ew, what is that thing? Lilac teased her. It's hideous. I don't care, Drosera said. It's the only nice creature here. I named him Treasure. Gross, it brought you bones. You can't wear that on your tiara. It'll attract the golems from the dark woods, and they'll eat you, making you a part of their muddy bodies. Lilac ran off and left Drosera to walk home alone, Treasure following behind her. At 16, Princess Drosera was invited to the royal ball. She went to her wardrobe to pick out a dress and found that moths and mice had chewed holes through all her dresses and shoes. She swore one of the mice gave her a rude gesture as it scampered off. Her sister came prancing down the hall in her bright blue dress, the butterflies still tying off a bow in her hair. Drosera hated that everything always worked out for Lilac. Drosera's disdain at the unfairness of life turned inward, and she gave in to self-loathing and despair. It was at that moment a fairy godmother appeared. A 5-foot-tall man dressed in drag with a 5 o'clock shadow. The orange glow from the lit cigarette hanging from his lips illuminated the chest hairs poking out of the top of his corset. He smoked the last half of his cigarette in one deep, long pull, then flicked it out the open window of her room. The name's Bruno. I'm your fairy godmother. We got a lot of work to do and not a lot of time. Here, I'm gonna need you to eat this burrito. He held up a very greasy and droopy burrito which smelled of old beans and cheese. Excuse me? Drosera said. You want me to eat that? Yeah, it gets the magic kick-started. He plopped the burrito in her hands and began looking around the room. Where's your furry woodland creature friend? My what? She asked with a mouthful of burrito. It tasted the way old socks smell when left in the wash too long. She gagged as she swallowed and took a second bite. You're a princess, right? I've got the right castle? He pulled out a parchment scroll and looked over his notes. Says here you need a ride to the ball. I need a furry woodland creature to magic into that ride. My notes list something named Treasure. Drosera stopped mid-bite. Treasure? I think he's under the bed. Forcing down the last third of the burrito, Drosera swallowed it whole so she wouldn't have to taste the gooey insides. Gross, she lamented with a belch. What's in that thing? Magic fairy dust. Tastes awful. Putrefies food within minutes. But for it to work on human, it's gotta be ingested. They both dropped down to their knees to peer under the bed. Treasure was there, cross-eyed, tongue lolling out the side of his open mouth, panting short, quick, erratic breaths. It hissed at them and then scampered out from under the bed, its stumpy leg thwap, thwap, flapping as it scurried across the stone floor. Oh no you don't, you large, disgusting rat. Bruno brandished a glittery plastic star wand. A streak of light shot out the end of it, freezing the possum in its tracks. Treasure began vibrating and growing, magic stardust swirling around. A saddle formed on its back as his form enlarged to the size of a small donkey. Drosera shook her head. I thought you were going to turn it into a horse or something. You just made it bigger is all. You didn't even fix his stumpy leg. Bruno just shook his head and scoffed. That's not how magic works, princess. Now what are we going to do about this dress you're wearing? It looks like undergarments. It is my undergarments. I don't have anything to wear. All my dresses have holes in them. She paused and clutched her belly. Oh, I don't feel right. Oh, good. The burrito's beginning to work. Hold on. It should remove all unwanted body hair and give you some curves. I don't think it hurts. But magic never went as planned for Dracera. Her belly swelled and extended, and as she looked down in horror, the hair from the top of her head slid off. This is not the type of curves I was expecting, Dracera cried. Now I'm bald and I look pregnant. Hold on, I can fix this, Bruno said, waving his wand. The swelling in her belly divided into 4 smaller lumps. 2 worked their way up her chest and 2 shot around to her backside. And her hair sprouted thicker than before, with a perfect natural bounce. It was quite the transformation. I don't look like myself at all anymore. I can't meet a prince looking like this and then back to normal the next time I see him. Sweetheart, he'll never notice. A raven alighted on the windowsill and Bruno snapped his fingers. Just what we need. Now hold still, this part is tricky. With the wave of his wand, the raven disappeared in a puff of black feathers that went swirling around Dracera's new body. When the fluttering all stopped, she was covered in a dress of black raven feathers clinging tight to her like a second skin. Her shoulders were bare, her new bosom framed tastefully by a cascading of feathery tips. All right, that should do it. Now, remember, the magic ends at midnight. You may feel a bit bloated as it begins to wear off. I would advise you not to be around anybody when that happens. Off you go. With a wave of his wand, Dracera was plopped on the back of Treasure, and they went riding out the castle before she could protest. She held on tightly to not be thrown from the asymmetrically bumpy ride of the stubby possum mount. When she arrived at the front gate of the castle, the valet refused to help her off, and no sooner had she got both feet on the ground, Treasure hissed at the valet and ran off back into the woods, leaving Dracera off balance and toppling into the muddy cart tracks. Where's the nearest washroom? She asked the porter, who only pointed up the hill towards the house. She did her best to clean herself up with the small basin of water that was provided. At least the dress was black and hid most of the mud stains. She was pleased with her appearance, but just as she walked back outside, a bird overhead pooped white streaks all down her gown. It was at that moment the prince came around the corner, face to face with her. Excuse me, miss. My, are you quite the sight to behold? Oh, where are my manners? I'm Prince Richard, and whom do I have the pleasure of meeting this evening? I'm Dracera. Oh! She grabbed her belly in pain. It wasn't even 9 p.m., yet the magic was already wearing off. No, not now, she lamented. What's wrong, my lady? Are you ill? I can tend to you in one of the extra bedroom chambers. But the prince's words were drowned out by a long, horrendous fart that reverberated for an unnaturally long time. At first, her enlarged butt cheeks amplified the gaseous escape, but the longer it went on, the more her enhanced look shriveled away and the horrid noise began coming out in staccato, deflating spurts. The prince was long gone before Dracera was vacant of all the burrito's magic, her raven feather dress blown off in the wind. She ran away into the dark woods, embarrassed and mortified. She collapsed in a heap atop a large pile of rocks, sobbing into the moss-covered boulders. Then the boulders moved and began coming to life, erecting themselves into a tall, lumbering mass of a golem. Dracera knew this would be the end of her, and she resigned herself to being crushed and absorbed into the golem's body. But instead, the golem scooped her up and placed her on his shoulders, lumbering deeper into the woods until they came to a large stone castle. And there, Dracera's story truly began, as she was made the princess of the Stone Golem Kingdom. The end.
Yeah. Nicely done.
All right.
So there you have it, the anti-princess magic fantasy story.
That was the most descriptive fart I've ever heard
It
described.
was something.
It was something else for sure.
I liked it. I dug it.
So the idea would be, something like that fantasy realm where nothing goes right for this princess, but now she's found kind of in the anti-hero, her place.
So what was your word count for that?
It was 1,500, like right at it.
That was only
Yeah.
1,500?
Yeah, I had it about 1,700, and I was able to scale it back. But it was one of those things where as I cut at least, so not even necessarily cut, like I had to take paragraphs and really trim them and rearrange them to fit as much of the descriptive terms in little words as possible, which is, like I said earlier, that's probably the biggest trick, hardest trick to do with these things.
Screenwriting.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's a crappy situation to be in.
But
It really stinks when you have to do that.
So I can only imagine what Katie has in store for us is nothing of the sort of what I just read. So now we will have Katie read her flash fiction.
The Andromeda Voyage. Jeremy Applegate was 19 years old when he was pressed from a Bristol wharf into service aboard the HMS Lydia. At 20, on the far side of the Atlantic, the sloop pursued the Velasco, a Spanish ship of the line laden with the spoils of war. At 21, just this morning, the Lydia's wreckage washed over the sea and Jeremy was lost in it. The cannons fired somewhere beyond the next wave's crest, and as he grasped at the flotsam keeping his wounded body from sinking, a grinding shriek drew his gaze to the heavens. He gaped, eyes going wide, his breath seizing in his chest as the dragon burst over the horizon. Its unsevered gullet glowed bright with St. Elmo's green fire. June 1809, Somerset, England. The fox burst through the grass like an ember thrown from Hephaestus's forge. Behind him, 10 meters enclosing, came the hounds. Their furies, flecked with dewdrop diamonds, winged with a primal lust for blood. The desert-gray lurchers were silent as they sprinted after the quarry. The swish and snap of sod underfoot was the sound of death in the fox's ears. The bright Todd wasn't ready to face the snapping jaws yet, when he still had tricks in his arsenal to deploy. As the fox led the chase down a hill and into the pastureland, Anthem Cray urged his bay gelding on in pursuit of the best view. Though his rifle was fixed to his saddle, this was the dog's hunt, and the man was an eager observer. He grinned like the old dog loping at his horse's heels. Both eager for the chase, but both knowing it wasn't their time yet. The fox jogged to the right, losing Huxley's hound, but Quince's nimbler pair tore after it unhindered. The ginger collie lurcher, Leviton's new pup, swung further to the right, herding instincts fully engaged. It was the ginger's first fox, and the pup was working admirably. Cray's old hound, Castor, a graying desert-born Saluki, whined and paced between the horses. His fading strength and poor eyes kept him from the hunt, though his heart still remembered and longed for the chase. Tradition, and something about the dog never forgiving him, kept Cray from leaving his shadow behind at the house, now miles away. "Look at him go," Cray murmured of the fox, then louder. "What do you think, Quince?" He cast a bright brown eye to his friend, mounted on a dun pony. Though the Welsh cob Quince was riding was tall for her breed, nearly exceeding 14 hands, the difference between the pony and the horses was comical. Cray reined his horse near to Quince, though his gaze kept shooting off after the dogs. His hair curled just above his eyes, damped down and darkened to true brown by the morning's fog and drizzle. His russet coat was still clean, and the neckerchief fairly orderly, though only by some great miracle. The mud and sod on his boots was warranted, considering the brace of rabbits tied behind the rifle. "It would be a shame to kill such a fine specimen of courage," Quince commented, following the twist and dash of the hunt with his gaze. "But, as my own dear captain likes to remark, that's what they said when they let a rogue sloop break our line off the coast of Albany, and then he destroyed a good man of war. So, let the dogs run." With a sidelong grin and an arched eyebrow at Cray, Quince urged the pony into light trot down the hillside after the dogs, who were swiftly approaching the hedgerows at the edge of the pasture. The sound of approaching hooves turned the men's attention from the chase. Cresting the hill, a man in red uniform reined his panting black mount toward the hunters. "Lieutenant Anthem Cray," he called. Cursing under his breath, Cray turned toward the Marine. "You've found me. Can't this wait at the house? We're in the middle of a hunt." The messenger shook his head. "My apologies, sir, but the issue is urgent. I have orders from headquarters for you. Your reply is requested in person at your utmost convenience." Behind him, Quince shouted, and the bay and bark of the dogs rose. The fox was lost in the hedgerow. Portsmouth. Lieutenant Anthem Cray of the Royal Marines strode through the barracks toward the officers' quarters, his orders gripped in hand. Around him, the halls of Greystone rang with the sound of military drills and prickled with the use of magic. The last time he had been here was years ago, orders in hand and under guard. He had risen in rank and honor since. His path found him beneath the stony gaze of the unicorn, the nation's own patron saint. Below the unicorn's seal lay Major Fleming's door. He paused there a moment, considering the missive and what could have happened to bring him here. Cray was used to getting orders from the hand of his commanding officers at sea, sending him hither and yon from one ship to another, but coming out to the country in pursuit of him, most unordinary. Straightening his uniform and setting his cap straight, Cray took a deep breath and knocked. "Come in," came the major's call. Cray opened the door and stepped through. The room was dimly lit, dimly furnished, and lorded over by a man gargoyle-esque in appearance. Stony, imposing, and immovable. Major Fleming had weathered many a storm in his time, both at sea and in the drama of the courts, the bureaus, and the military itself. Cray came to stand before the desk, setting his back straight, chest out almost self-consciously as Fleming peered down at him. "Lieutenant Cray, reporting as requested, sir." Major eyed the man coolly before nodding. "I'm glad we caught you when we did, sir. Please, have a seat. News from the Americas came in last night, and we have a situation at hand that must be resolved." With a breath, Cray took the proffered chair and hung his hat from his knee. "The Spanish up to something down there, or is it the French this time?" "Both," the major replied. Cray gave a resigned nod, and the major continued. "And neither. The Lydia was lost 3 weeks ago off the coast of New Andalusia after pursuit of the Spanish ship Velasco. Pendragon picked up a survivor 3 days after." "Lucky he didn't get eaten by sirens," Cray growled. The major peered down at him over the edge of his portfolio. "Lucky indeed. The man's account brought a lot of things into question, never mind the captain's decision to pursue the Velasco, but here we are. Our man says the Spanish had a dragon aboard their ship. A whole one." Cray straightened at that. "Whole, sir? You mean an entire carcass?" "No. Intact, ungulleted." "Damn," Cray breathed. "What were they thinking? No. Where did they get a dragon? I thought they were extinct in the wild." Considering the nature of the seaman's injuries and how long he was at sea, it stands to reason that he could have been delirious. We have no further accounts of dragons coming out of that region, and surely even the Spanish would know better than to store an ungulleted dragon in the hold of a ship. And yet, the major nodded, and yet we have reports of acts of magic coming from the peninsula that suggest Mancy was far more capable than they had been previously. The Bureau of Mancy and Magic suggests that dragon's blood could be the source of this problem. And if it is one we need to stop her the source of, and quickly. Cray nodded and inhaled deeply. "And you called for me specifically, sir?" "Yes. After your endeavors in Algiers, your skills did not go unnoticed, and every other officer of your caliber is already engaged somewhere else." Cray shook his head. "Surely you can't be serious." "I am," Cray continued, "but there are others better, more practiced mancers." "You mean your cousin?" The major held Cray's gaze and smirked. "Captain Miriam Levitt will be leading the Andromeda's complements of Marines. Your mission is to disrupt and capture any other dragon the Spanish may be in possession of and capture their source. You will depart with her in 3 days, bound for New Andalusia. I suggest you get your effects in order." The old man rose and Cray followed suit. "Congratulations, Lieutenant. Should the Andromeda succeed in her mission, you will be the first in 100 years to set eyes on a live, wild dragon." The end.
Nicely done.
You know what's really funny is I was planning on having my princess run into a dragon, and that was going to be what like befriended her. But I was like, that's too much like the plot line from Shrek 2.
Sure.
And so I was like, let me change it to a golem. And I was like, wow, this is perfect. we don't end up have 2 dragon stories. So I'm glad you went with dragon.
Nice. This has the potential to be a sea adventure, but also maybe a little bit of a survival horror, depending on how things go. Who knows what is in the jungles of South America at this time period with magic and dragons and sirens running about.
Nice.
Very cool.
I dig it. There aren't enough I'm trying to think, but there aren't enough like sea adventure stories like there used to be, you know? Like those were so fun as a kid, you know.
Yeah.
Pirates and
I'm a big fan of the Aubrey Maturin series by Patrick O'Brien. And that was this was inspired significantly by that.
nice.
Very cool.
Well, all I got to say after those two is Bill and I have our work cut out for us. That's all I got to say.
I actually started going back to my old story notes and going, I got to come up with something here. If there's one thing that I remembered for the first time listening to Steven, it was what I learned from the original or first and second season podcast is never write a lot of characters when you have to do the voiceover, when you have to act it.
Yeah, that's true.
It's very difficult. And I didn't mean you did a great job, Stephen. I was just thinking, oh my gosh, I got to remember, don't have 6 people centered around a table having a back and forth conversation. I can't keep the voices straight. I can't keep the voices in my head straight.
No, but it's true though, because especially in the audio form, you have to kind of figure out how to get those characters to sound unique enough.
Yep.
Just not even in the way they speak, but also in the way you deliver it.
Now you pulled out the Dexter Poindexter character. I like that. You remember who he was? I can't remember. That wasn't his real name. It was something Poindexter. Buster Poindexter, not Dexter Poindexter.
It was Buster Poindexter. Yes, that's true.
David Johansen. It was the guy. He was the lead singer for the New York Dolls, and then he went off on his own. Tall hair and all that. I don't know if you guys.
Oh no, I do. The one of the best things about doing this podcast is hearing Steven read and do voices. That's like top 2 or 3 things about doing those podcasts.
Those voices were something.
Yeah. I still tell people, I'm like, you should go back to season 3 and listen to my French accent.
Oh.
But so there you have it. Our faithful listeners, you have 2 different stories, and we're going to put up a voting link, which you will find on our social media pages, and you'll find it on our newly launched webpage as well.
Booyah.
So be looking for that. It will be www.brewandink.com. You'll also be able to find us at brewandinkpodcast.com as well. So that.
Wow, you're getting fancy on me.
Fancy, yeah. Next time we are going to have Britt and Bill read, and then we'll vote on that, and we'll go from there. And I was realizing too, like as I was listening to Katie, I was like, I remembered, oh yeah, last time we did flash fiction, we did under 1,000 words, and that extra 500 really does allow you some wiggle room to develop a little more. So this is exciting. I'm happy to be back here doing this with you guys again, and I'm really looking forward to season 7. Unfortunately, I don't think any of us are drinking a brew at this moment. I have water, which is not really
I have tea. I do have tea.
Okay, there you go. One of these days, I'll have you guys over and you can partake from my brand new kegerator, Keezer, straight from the tap. We are aging our vanilla porter for about another month, and then I'll be putting that one on tap. And I've got the last bit of a chocolate stout, and we've got an IPA right now.
Nice.
I'll be there in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got a strawberry wine in the works.
Ooh.
And Caleb wants to do a mead soon, so we'll be getting honey for that shortly.
Oh, that'll be great. Meads is another one that you want to age for a while before it really starts tasting good.
Yeah.
Like this chocolate stout that we have, it's like really good right now, but we brewed it back in July of last year, and just those darker, richer, sweeter beers really benefit from giving it that time to age. So I'll be looking forward to trying some mead.
Oh yeah, I do like some mead. So did you have Naomi crush the berries with her feet, like barefoot, in like a maid's outfit or something?
Yeah, she wasn't in the room at the time. I had scored some 1-gallon glass carboys from the neighbors recycling a few days beforehand.
Very cool.
And the problem is I don't have a funnel. Like my only funnel that fits that is really narrow. So I had to blend the berries, but Naomi is terrified of my blender.
Oh no.
So I had to do it while I think Caleb had her out of the house at the time where she was asleep. So she doesn't know about those strawberries.
That's
She
amazing.
enjoyed the leftovers, but this will be my first strawberry wine. Hopefully it goes well. So far it's smelling pretty nice. But it's
On the blackberry vines this year already.
good.
So we're going to be seeing a crop for doing some of
Yeah,
that.
the
Excellent.
blackberry I tried to turn to vinegar. So it's still usable, just not in the function that I had hoped for. But I think that's, might be kind of gross to our listeners or whatever. But so I think it's because the fruit goes softer than strawberries and other things, so the fruit flies get on it, and that transfers the acetobacter that turns things into vinegar. So I'm going to try a slightly different technique and maybe actually boil my fruit instead of doing the wild yeast like I typically do. But we'll see what happens. My methods are a lot more chaotic than yours, guys.
Well, especially with the wild yeast, you're just like, spinning the roulette of whatever kind of yeast you could get.
And it worked fantastic with the blueberry that I did a couple years ago. And that aged probably 2 years before I drank it, just because I forgot about it. But it was tasty.
I'm just a consumer. You guys are all like, you're making stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to show up at the brewery and come over to your house and drink your stuff.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Brewing doesn't mean you have to make it. You just favor both, right?
Enjoy it.
We brew all sorts of things.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for this episode. And it's great to have Bill, Britt, myself, and Katie all here with you guys. And of course, our faithful listeners. Remember to raise that glass to inspiration and stay inspired, guys.